Good to go? First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for attending this big game meeting. My name is Hunter Bailey. I'm the district manager for the Northwest District. Here with me tonight we have Commissioner Doug Zingula, Assistant Division Administrator Pat Molini, Big Game Program Manager Luke Maduna, Disease and Research Program Manager Todd Nordine, Matt Steffel and Catherine Crawley from the Wildlife and Habitat Partners Division. I'd also like to mention Catherine is based out of here at Sydney, so she'll be a local contact for you guys. We also have Jim Zimmerman and Sean McKeon from Law Enforcement, biologist from Scotts Bluff, Chris Becker, biologist from Alliance, Justin Powell, and our Public Information Officer, Justin Haig. So our agenda for tonight, we're primarily going to focus on big game species management and update. We're going to go over some 2019 recommendation considerations, and then we'll follow into questions and comments and concerns after the slideshow here. So our goal is to manage big game populations at levels consistent with social and biological carrying capacities. We're going to provide opportunities for aesthetic enjoyment and hunting. The Nebraska State Legislature has mandated that the Nebraska Game and Parks put us in charge of managing the wildlife resources. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, National Forest Service offer assistance as well. So when developing big game recommendations and regulations, it's going to start at 4 districts. At the district level, there's 4 districts in Nebraska. Within those districts, we're going to examine all biological and sociological data. Districts then make recommendations to the commission through administrative channels. Then the NGPC Board of Commissioners will vote on at a public meeting. Here's an image of our 4 districts. Northwest is what we'll be in and discussing tonight. Northeast, Southeast, and Southwest. So some general inputs to big game management. Sociological considerations, that's going to be landowner interest, depredation issues. We're also going to consider public interest and safety, such as automobile accidents. And then we also are going to consider hunter interest. Within hunter interest, we have compound archers, traditional archers, muzzleloader hunters, trophy hunters, doe hunters. So we have a wide array of hunter interests we also have to consider. Biological considerations, that's going to be what us, the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission, provides. We're going to consider harvest data, age structure, sex ratios, fawn-calf production, as well as population trends, disease outbreaks, and species interaction goals and research. So our responsibilities as a commission, we're going to develop permits and seasons to manage big game in a responsible and biologically sound manner. We're going to provide regulation and policy to assist landowners in controlling damage within tolerable limits. We're also going to provide equal opportunity for hunters within the framework of management goals and strategies, and also recruit hunters as well. Landowners also have responsibilities to estimate populations locally. If populations are too high, we're going to suggest increasing antlerless harvest, give access to hunters who harvest does. Other ways are if you lease property, you can require an antlerless harvest quota. And also work with your neighbors in achieving common management goals is vital. So as hunters, we also have responsibility. We need to work with the landowner to manage numbers and quality. We need to harvest females if population reduction is desired. We also need to focus on harvesting animals ethically and responsibly. Donating surplus meat is also a responsibility of us, and mentoring and recruiting new hunters. So we're going to talk a little bit about elk harvest and management. I wanted to point out this year in Nebraska and Lincoln County, I believe it was. This is going to be the number 2 non-typical record. It's going to come in at a little above 418 inches, so we're still producing some very big bulls. Our elk management goal is to manage elk populations at optimum levels consistent with social and biological carrying capacity, and to provide opportunities for aesthetic enjoyment and public hunting. So recommendation considerations for elk, we're going to focus on surveys. Within that, we're going to have some population surveys, estimates of bulls, cows, and calves. We're also going to periodically do hunter and landowner surveys. herd status by unit relative to population objectives. Disease and parasites will be consideration. Another large one is depredation complaints from landowners, non-harvest mortality, habitat conditions. Within harvest data, we're going to look at success, location, the age structure, sex, harvest, and then we're going to look at antler measurements. Some guidelines for bull recommendations. We're looking at 70% success on bulls. We're also looking for most of those bulls to have 6 or more points on one antler, minimum average main beam length of 45 inches, and a minimum mean age of 5 years. So here's some general bull elk draw odds. Since we're in the North Platte unit, we're just going to focus on them tonight. With 0 bonus points, you're looking at a 1 in 114 chance. With 1 in 57. With 2, 1 in 38. With 3, 1 in 29. And if you're up to the 4, you're looking at a 1 in 23 chance of drawing a bull tag in the North Platte unit. Some cow elk draw odds in the North Platte unit. There were 207 applicants this year. We gave out 30 tags, so that's going to equate to roughly a 1 in 7 chance. That's going to be right on par with most all of our units outside of Boyd and Box Elder, where they're going to be 1 in 15 and 1 in 16. Elk are managed in 7 units. This year we gave out 114 bull licenses. We also gave out 231 cow licenses. 2/3 of those are going to be for the general tag drawing, and 1/3 of those are going to go to landowners. We also had 5 auction and super tags. Here's just a map of our elk management units. The southwest corner of the Panhandle, south part of the Panhandle will be the North Platte River unit. Hat Creek, Ash Creek, Bordeaux, and then southeast of us would be the Box Elder unit. Elk Harvest statewide. This year we harvested 99 bulls, which is going to equate to an 87% success rate. In 2017, we harvested 122 cows, and that's going to equate to a 57% success rate. I should mention that cow season is still going on until the 15th, so we don't have all those numbers, but we'll get to a little bit of that here in a second. This year we had 350 tags issued, so that's been a bump compared to years past, just slightly, but it has been a bump. So some preliminary data for elk harvest. I just kind of want to focus on this slide and point out that last year we harvested 122 cows. As of last week, we were only at 58 cows. So we have, like I said, until January 15th, so we're expecting that number to rise, hopefully quite a bit, but that's just kind of where we're setting at now. Here's some bull harvest data for the Northwest District. The Ash Creek unit we'll go over first. We had 100% success. Our main beam length averaged 45.66 inches, and we were at 91% were 6 point or better. We don't have any age data back yet. That'll be coming in the future. And the Bordeaux unit, we were down a little bit. We were only at 62.5% success. Our main beam length is very, very good in that unit. We were at 48. We dropped off a little bit compared to last year, but not too much. Our percent 6 point or better was still at 93%. In the Hat Creek unit, our success rate was 86%. Main beam length was a shy over 45, which is what we're after, and our percent 6 point or better was at 100. In the North Platte River unit, we had an 87% success rate. Main beam length was a little bit over 46, and percent 6 point was 81. In the Niobrara River unit, we had a 100% success rate for the second year in a row. Our main beam length does come in a little bit shorter than we'd like. It's sitting at about 42.66, but we're still not far off from that 45. And percent 6 point is going to be right at 78. So a little bit about elk landowner zones. So landowner elk permits differ from deer, as in you can hunt any property within the unit. Our objective with that is to get the limited landowner permits to the property owners that provide most of the elk habitat, have higher elk numbers, or have considerable depredation problems. So there's some specific criteria to be met to get into that elk landowner zone. We'll go over a little bit of that too, but the landowner must also contact the NGPC office to be considered for that, set up a meeting. So some landowner elk zone criteria: must have a minimum acreage of 320 acres. Area needs to have a history of elk usage. Elk must spend a minimum of 2 to 4 seasons there. Area must contain the 4 basic needs: food, shelter, water, and space. Must be, shouldn't say must be, but a documented elk calving area will help out your chances. Consistent numbers of elk provide opportunity to harvest elk during hunting seasons. And use is significant based on tracks, scat, photos, sheds, wallows, etc. And also depredation issues are a major factor in that. Just a quick little image of landowner elk zones currently in the Hat Creek, Ash Creek, and Bordeaux units. The North Platte River unit, this is what's currently enrolled. And then up in the Niobrara unit. Some more images from elk season this year. Just goes to show you that we're still producing quality animals at high success rates. So getting that once in a lifetime time tag is, you're going to have a good opportunity at harvesting a good animal. So expectations in 2019, we want to continue with the preference point system for landowners, continue bonus points for general bull tags, stabilize permit numbers in most panhandle units, while others may see a slight change, and possibility of having the option to buy a preference and bonus point system without actually applying for the permit. Pronghorn Harvest and Management. So the distribution of pronghorn is primarily in the western half of the state, with the majority in the panhandle. Within the panhandle, the highest densities are going to be in the North Sioux unit, the North Sioux unit, Dawes County, followed by Banner and Kimball counties. So some recommendation considerations. We're going to do fawn to doe ratio surveys, buck to doe ratio surveys, population estimates and trends, hunter landowner surveys, harvest data such as harvest success rates. We're shooting between that 65 to 75%. If we drop below 65% for too many years, it'll be a consideration. We'll just consider of decreasing tags, and if we're setting above that 75% consistently, we'll look at increasing tags. And that has to do with our harvest trends. We're going to be looking at age and sex data as well. We want to shoot for yearling buck harvest to be 20% or below. Depredation reports again. More and more depredation reports we get, that's going to affect numbers as well. Monitoring disease and predators, weather, habitat conditions, as well as illegal harvest. So our pronghorn are managed in 11 units. In 2018, we issued 755 October firearm permits, 188 muzzleloader permits, and as of last week, we had issued 1,151 archery permits. Of those archery permits, 264 were to non-residents. We also have 8 late season units. Those are managed for a doe and fawn harvest, and within those we had 485 permits. Just a quick map of our current pronghorn units. And since we're down here in the southwest part of the panhandle, we're going to just look kind of here at the Banner North unit. So Banner North, we had a 69% success rate, and our percent year and a half old was only at 10%. Banner South, we had an 84% success rate, and we were setting at 11% being a year and a half. Cheyenne County, 77% success rate, and we were up to 18% being a year and a half in that unit. In the Garden, we had 62% success rate, which is a little bit lower than we'd like, but our age class was down to 7% a year and a half years or older, or excuse me, just a year and a half. Some current data, other pronghorn data. Current late season doe fawn success is only at 17%, so that's pretty low. We'd really like that to bump, and we expect it to bump as season runs until January 31st. Archery success as of the 26th of December, we were only setting at 21%, which is right on par, and we don't really expect that number to change a whole lot. 2019 expectations. So we're going to consider stabilizing October firearm permits in most of the units. We're looking to increase possibly increase late season doe and fawn tags in needed areas to address winter depredation problems. We're also going to evaluate and consider modifications to the late doe fawn seasons, continue monitoring population levels, as well as consider landowner tag changes. With those possibility of landowner tag changes, do you have any thoughts on restructuring the pronghorn landowner permit in regards to what lands a pronghorn permit holder may hunt on? Currently, one's restricted to the land he or she owns. Another option may be any private land within the permit is valid. Any thoughts on that from landowners or hunters here?
I think that option of being able to hunt on any private land would be viable because they migrate so much.
Because they migrate so much.
Your ground, then when you get ready for a season or something.
Yep.
He's on the neighbors or something like that.
And that's kind of the thought process behind it. And now there is going to be some pros and cons with that. Some pros, like you said, you're going to be able to kind of maybe call your neighbor and say, I'm having an issue, especially late season. Some cons are possibility of you're going to increase your pool for your October firearm, so the draw is going to be probably much more difficult.
As far as landowner pool?
Yeah, landowner pool. So that it would be harder. We would assume that it would be harder to draw that October firearm rifle tag with that many more landowners in the pool.
Would the ratios remain the same between the landowners?
I think we would assume that the ratios would, is that all? That's statute, okay, so that would remain the same.
So is it statutory that we can only increase like this doe season by X% a year?
I don't think that's statutory.
Can we like double, triple, quadruple that when we've got thousands of them running around?
So that's one thing that we're going to be looking into. With that not being statutory, that's in our approach papers, correct? So we've discussed that. Sometimes that 10% increase on 40 tags is only 4. So we kind of get the point that that's pretty minimal. And yeah, that 10% increase isn't necessarily going to take care of the issues at the time. So.
The other thing I hear a lot of, I complain about it. I feed them, fix the fence, sort my cows out when they tear them down, and I got to pay 20, whatever it is, $30 for a doe tag. I should be sending you a bill.
Yeah. Yep.
And,
I understand. Yep.
That's irritating to landowners. I don't mind a few.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Hundreds of them out there eating all your stuff and tearing your fences up. It's quite a different issue.
Yep. Yep.
I don't mind having some.
Absolutely.
And I love having hunters come hunt. My family and friends, whatever. I don't charge. Please
Yep.
don't shoot.
Yeah, exactly.
Price is an issue, because I hear a lot of hunters saying you get, a bowl full of meat out of the deal, and you gotta spend $35, $40 for a tag.
Yep. And that's something we'll definitely consider. You want to write that down, Justin? And that's an issue too. So.
Well, we do have a system where if you want to be on our depredation list in the Alliance District Office, Nancy, they'll write your name down on the list, and so whenever people call the office looking for a place to go, they will pass along that information, so you will have more hunters contacting you.
And in defense of you guys, my cousin, they come hunt on me for decades, but he's got 3. I still have 1 to shoot, but he did get contacted by someone around Alliance.
So we had some major depredation.
And I said, no, you're killing mine.
Yeah, and we had a lot of that. So we had some major
Well, that's a good
depredation,
thing.
and we're going to maybe work on something like that in the future where we can possibly, we'll get the landowner and the hunter in more direct contact, just to help those issues. And we can talk a little bit more about that later too. So we're going to move on a little bit. We're going to talk about deer management. So deer management, our goal is to provide quality hunting and viewing opportunities within the limits of the deer resource, while maintaining deer numbers at a level that most landowners will accept in terms of damage. So we're going to do just a little basic biology first. Whitetail deer, statewide distribution. They have high reproduction rates. Oftentimes have twins or triplets, and many times they will often breed as fawns. They're going to be less vulnerable to hunters, more vulnerable to EHD, especially in drought years. It's going to take roughly a 50% mortality rate to stop herd growth. Mule deer, it's going to be they're going to be mainly located in the western 2/3 of the state. Lower reproduction rates compared to whitetails. They're usually going to have just a single or twin fawns. They rarely breed as fawns. They're going to be more vulnerable to brainworm, more vulnerable to hunters as well. And it takes roughly a 30% mortality rate to stop herd growth. Here's another map of our 18 deer management units. We also have 21 antlerless only season choice limit units, and we do have some public and private land restrictions. In the Pine Ridge, there will be no mule deer does harvested, as well as on Crescent Lake Wildlife Refuge. And then also at McKelvey and Valentine Refuge, there's no use of bonus antlerless tags or season choice tags. So some deer management, a lot of our deer management is just based off of harvest trends, success rate, total harvest by permit type, and then a lot by buck age as well. Depredation complaints are also a factor, and then the surveys that we do. So here's some firearm season check station totals for the Northwest District. Just for the sake of being here, Sydney, and this year we checked in 233 deer. The 2014 to 2017 average is 227. So we're going to be right on par, pretty much even. In the district, we checked in 6,607 deer, or 6,607, yes, excuse me. That puts us down 1% from last year, but we're going to be up a couple from the 5-year average. Some mule deer and whitetail harvest statewide. So the total harvest this year, as of the 27th, Luke, was that when you're in this? So as of the 27th, so we still have the season choice season, as well as the last 4 days of muzzleloader and archery. But the total harvest was at 51,171. That puts us down about 1,200 deer. The mule deer buck was at 8,941. That drops us down about 860. We're still at the second highest ever recorded mule deer buck harvest, so that's good. Whitetail buck, 26,374. That puts us down about 2,400 compared to last year. Statewide age structure. So for mule deer, we're managing for the number of yearling bucks to be no more than 25% of the adult buck harvest. Right now we're setting it about, it's hard to see, we're setting it about like 12%, and the purple line here is going to represent 3.5-year-olds. So we're going to be about just over 50% with 3.5-year-olds. For whitetail, we're managing for 60% of harvest of adult bucks to be age 2 or older in each deer management unit, and 70% statewide. I did take out 2.5-year-olds on this just for the sake of comparison overall, but as you can see, the 1.5-year-olds are going to be right at that 22 to 24%, and our 3.5-year-olds are setting up close to 40. Since we're doing this one on YouTube Live, I'm going to do all the districts, all the deer management units in the Northwest District. The Pine Ridge unit harvest, total harvest was at 2,035 deer. We're going to be down 310 from last year. Mule deer buck harvest is at 762. That's going to put us down 137. Our whitetail buck harvest is at 851. That's going to put us up 181. Last year we took mule deer tags. We took 550 away of them, I believe, switched them to whitetail tags, so that was expected. Pine Ridge rifle success and age structure. Success in the Pine Ridge was at 52% during rifle season. The age structure for mule deer, we're going to be right at that 44%, above 3.5 or older, and for whitetails we're going to be about the same. In the Plains unit, our total harvest was 1,941. That's going to put us down about 165. Our mule deer buck harvest was up 25 though, as we harvested 1,122 deer. Whitetail bucks, we harvested 405, and that puts us up 34 this year. So some Plains age structure, and the rifle success was 62%. We're We're going to have about 50% of the mule deer are going to be over 3.5 or older, and just over 40% of the whitetails will be. So Sandhills unit harvest, total harvest this year was 2,063 deer. We're going to be up 11 compared to last year. Mule deer bucks, 1,107. It's going to be right on par basically with last year, only being down 1. Whitetail bucks, 674, very similar as well. We're going to be up 5 deer. Now in the Sandhills unit, our age structure is phenomenal. We're looking at 70% of our mule deer being harvested in that unit are going to be 3.5 years or older, and our whitetail aren't too far off that as well, as we're going to be nearly 60%. In the upper Platte, total harvest was 1,442 deer. That's going to put us down 129. Mule deer bucks, 857. That'll be up 41 deer. Whitetail bucks are going to be down 75, with only harvesting 253 this year. So the success this year during rifle season was 62%. Our age class for our 3.5-year-old or mule deer, we're going to have about 45% of them be 3.5 or older, and our whitetails are going to be very similar again as well. So I'll talk a little bit about chronic wasting disease. Currently we're in a monitoring phase. We're assessing the spread and prevalence of the disease through periodic testing in each region of the state. That's on our rotating testing. Communication with hunters and conservation partners, public health officials to keep up to date with ongoing efforts. We're continuing research in conjunction with other agencies and states to further the knowledge of chronic wasting disease spread, prevention and management. All this is going to help our biologists predict if and when future effects on deer numbers may occur. So in 2018, we tested in 5 deer management units: Kepahaw, Loop West, Plains, Pine Ridge, and Sandhills. In the Plains unit, 45 of our 233 deer tested came back positive. That's going to be at 19.3% prevalency rate. Pine Ridge, 68 of our 222 came back positive. That's going to put us a shade over 30%. And in the Sandhills, we had 13 out of 215 test positive. So that's going to set us right about 6%. Overall, since 1997, we've tested nearly 53,000 deer, and we found that 630 have tested positive. Chronic wasting disease has now been found in 42 of the 93 Nebraska counties, but no population declines are attributable to the disease have been identified. So here's a occurrence map. These are all the 2018 locations. We can pull this up if you guys want to look at it closer later. That's the occurrence map. This year, like I said, we'll add Valley County right there, and Kepahaw will be added to the list. So expectations in 2019, there'll be minor permit quota changes, maintain river antlerless permits with bonus tags. We're also going to continue the antlerless mule deer restrictions in the Pine Ridge, as well as on the Crescent Lake National Wildlife Refuge. We're going to continue CWD sampling. It will be across the state. What other regions, Todd, or units, do you know?
Northeast.
For all. It'll be Plains and Pine Ridge in 2019 for the Northwest District.
Just in the Northwest, yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Northeast, it'll be, Wahoo, Elkhorn,
Northeast will be Wahoo, Elkhorn,
and Loop East or Cal East.
and Loop East or Cal East. We're also going to be beginning some mule deer research in the Pine Ridge unit. This is going to be similar to what they did in the Southwest District. We're going to be determining survival and cause-specific mortality of both adult and neonatal female mule deer. With that, it's going to determine habitat selection of adult females throughout the year. It's also going to determine home range and movement of adult females and fawns. Another thing I'd like to mention is the Hunters Helping the Hungry program. In 2017, 141,000 meals were provided to Nebraskans in need. So that's a great program to get behind. Another one for hunters looking to donate some meat is going to be the Deer Exchange. That can be, you can find information on that on our website, outdoornebraska.gov. That's essentially just a database that connects hunters and landowners. Or excuse me, yeah. Bighorn Sheep. This is going to be Dave Hunter from Auburn, Nebraska. He's our lottery tag winner this year. He harvested a very nice sheep out of the Pine Ridge herd. A little bit about the Bighorn Sheep population in the Pine Ridge, sitting at right at 100, and the Wildcat Hills we're at about 160. We're going to continue to monitor herds, collect data, research, and Bighorn Sheep, they provide a lot of recreation opportunities as far as viewing, photography, and hunting as well. So depredation and our response plan. We're going to continue to work with landowners. We want to respond to our landowners within 24 hours by phone at a minimum. There's a landowner depredation list we have. Hunting is our preferred method of control. That's what we're always going to try first. We'd like to coordinate youth hunts, other programs to promote hunting first. From there, we'll resort to scaring and hazing devices. If you have issues with hay, we could provide fencing materials for stack yards, habitat modification, harassment and ground and aerial, and then lastly would be kill permits. Landowners must allow sufficient hunting to be considered for kill permits. They also must be outside of hunting seasons. Game must be utilized or eaten. Kill permits are not issued for property leased for hunting. So there we can step into questions, comments, and concerns.
I have a question on the chronic wasting. Go back some years.
Okay.
Were there any other diseases of deer that you saw some of the same percentages higher in some areas? For instance, the Pine Ridge is highest in chronic wasting, right? I think. If I remember.
Yes.
Was it back in history in 10, 20 years ago when you had other diseases? Is it inherent in a location where you always have the highest diseases?
So we have a question regarding CWD. I don't know how to word that exactly. Where its highest prevalency, is that in accordance with other diseases in the past?
Yes,
is that
you found throughout history? In other words, it's almost then telling you, if you find these similarities, it's almost telling you which areas are your highest disease area. In other words, diseases spread.
Yeah, and I think
those locations.
There's so many different
Different
types, diseases and types, and Todd and Luke can expand on this quite a bit.
I don't know, blue tongue, there are a variety of stuff.
Yeah, step up here.
In terms of testing for CWD, we've been at that in the Panhandle since 1997, and we've continued off and on and rotated throughout the state, through much of these past 20 years or so. And but going back into history of that, we found it in very small amounts back in it was 2000 when we first had the first case of CWD in the Panhandle of Nebraska. But along with that, we've had instances of EHD, or the blue tongue, often referred to, throughout the state and throughout the country for that matter. And so, and areas in the Panhandle have been hit at times, somewhat significantly, but the major events in EHD, from what I recall, where we lost a lot of deer, was back in 1976, and then again in 2012, and somewhat in 2013. Those were the most significant events we've had in terms of losses of deer in the state. So outside of those diseases, there's others that are probably minimal, in terms of that. We do a lot of testing when we do have sick deer and so forth. We've come across cases of actually having cancer or, things of that nature, or brain abscesses. Meningeal brainworm is one that we are monitoring more closely and do have concerns about. We have had some significant issues over the years in other parts of the state, and probably affecting mule deer mostly because it's a dead-end host with mule deer, as opposed to whitetail it's not. So that's a concern, especially with some of the climate changes we've seen, and possibly seeing the movement of that maybe more out in the west. But so far, we have not documented any or verified any losses to meningeal brainworm in the Panhandle, mainly just CWD and EHD. So.
Nothing really geographically speaking as one disease compared to the other. That's kind of what you were getting at, correct?
No real patterns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering if 30 years ago, if you had like blue tongue disease, was it more prevalent and spread in Pine Ridge, just like CW?
In those significant events, it was pretty much statewide. you know, and actually nationally for that matter, in 76, you know, and then again in 2012 and somewhat in 13, you know, in terms of EHD or the blue tongue virus, you know, those were significant events that affected deer pretty much statewide. So outside of that, no, there's been no real pattern to CWD being in the Pine Ridge versus EHD or meningeal brainworm or anything like that. So. Okay.
Todd, while you're up there, could you maybe touch on how we've changed our sampling techniques or where we're taking samples from, what type of deer, and how that might impact some of your percentages that are showing up there?
Historically, when CWD first hit, you know, we were taking any deer from out here in the Panhandle, both whitetail and mule deer, and we were taking bucks, does, fawns, whatever, and testing all those. But, you know, over time and through a lot of research that's been done across the country, you know, there's belief that older age deer, especially older age bucks, you know, are more likely to spread the disease. So in more recent years, we've been focusing our attention on older age deer, in particular bucks, if we can get them from the hunters and at these check stations. And so targeting our surveillance on that, and potentially going to be able to see what they're doing in terms of spreading the disease. So, but as you saw with the information that was put up on the screen, you know, our prevalence has definitely gone up out here in the Panhandle. So it's a concern. We haven't seen it to the levels of some of the other states like Colorado, Wyoming, you know, and hopefully it won't get that high. But, you know, if you start getting into that 40–50% range of infection and positives, you know, then you're starting to get a little more concerned about impacts to your population. So something we're keeping an eye on and we'll continue to do with this rotation of disease testing around the state for CWD. But because of some of the issues we've had here in the Plains and Pine Ridge units, we will continue to test those probably for the foreseeable future.
Buck-doe ratio. What do you consider a healthy buck-doe ratio population?
One buck to 4 or 5 is pretty good. Generally, I mean, you get higher than that in some places in the country. You know, you might get, you know, higher than that 1 to 3 or so forth. But 1 to 4 or 5 is generally pretty good.
I was out every day, month of December, over here north of Potter, and I'd see 200 deer at a time every day. And I'm counting 20 bucks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what can be done to bring that ratio in line?
Of where at you talking?
Bring a better ratio in line.
Yeah, well, a lot of that is going to vary this time of year too, in terms of what your counts are and what you're seeing from a particular place. You get a lot of migration of deer into areas of croplands and so forth, and now this time of year too, you're starting to see antler loss, and so that can affect some of your ratios. But it's difficult in terms of doing some surveys, you know, by just roads and stuff. Your counts are often skewed, you know, to some degree this time of year, because you're not getting a good representation of all the deer, you know, throughout the area.
There tends to be some sexual segregation, particularly of the mature bucks. Typically don't hang with the large doe fawn groups. That's why typically a lot of times when you do see those large
Well,
groups,
early
there's
on
a lot
in the
of
month, they're still in the rut.
to a
When
certain
it's
extent.
cold, they're out. When you're out all the time, you're not seeing the bucks. You know, and what bucks you are seeing are smaller.
Mhm.
I understand that the big ones are often loners and they're
Separated, yeah.
But nonetheless, in cold weather, they're all out early and they go in late. You know, and I was out every day and I saw a lot of deer. A lot of deer. And I would have plenty of time to count. The ratio terrible.
That's why when we do our surveys and stuff, we try to cover a pretty large area so that we can have more accurate information in terms of those buck to doe ratios, because it can be a little difficult, like I was saying, with, you know, in areas where you're just concentrating in one area. But and as Luke said, you know, the segregation of the sexes, you know, plays into that as well. But in terms of impacting that, you know, there's a number of things you can probably do. You know, of course, harvest, you know, depending on what harvesting in a particular area, the number of permits, types of permits, those different things you know, certainly can contribute to making a difference in the numbers of bucks versus does in any particular area.
One of the other questions I know I've always kind of heard in debating when we start talking about buck to doe ratios is, are we including the fawns in that count? So if you're saying 1 to 4 to 5, is that mature does? 1 to 4 to 5, or are we counting fawns that you can't necessarily tell whether it's a doe or a buck?
Go ahead.
The question is, do we consider fawns in that buck to doe ratio? Is it overall bucks to antlerless, or is it bucks to adult does? And we do everything. When we do our surveys, we try to the big part of the surveys that we do, we're looking at those doe to fawn counts initially, and the bucks are kind of a secondary count, so it is all separated out. So we do get essentially a buck to doe to fawn ratio as a part of all of that.
I guess my question is, so if you're looking at a herd of 100 deer out there and you get 10 bucks and the rest of them are antlerless, is that a 1 to 10 ratio, or do you look back and go, okay, subtract out my fawn?
Yeah.
And now it's really a 1 to 5 ratio. You pick out 50% of that herd to the fawn.
Yes.
And now you got 50 does out there with 10 bucks, so it's a 5 to 1.
Yeah, exactly. If you're looking at 100 deer and you got a 10 bucks, and say you have 60 does and 30 fawns out of that to give you your 100, you're at a 1 to 6 ratio, and for your buck to doe.
So I'm a college kid up at Shadron, so in the Pine Ridge unit, of course, and I work at a Best Western where we have tons of hunters, and being a hunter myself, one of the biggest questions I'm asked is reason for no mule deer does, which of course is population. But I was wondering, like, what's a solid population that you'll open that up at, and how long has it been? I've just been up there, this is my 4th year now, but how long has it been no mule deer does up there?
Okay, the question is, how long have we had no mule deer does up in the Pine Ridge, and at what point will we reopen that? How long have we been?
It's in terms of, you know, we've had parts of that unit that were closed, you know, probably for almost 10 years, and we've had, you know, like some public areas that were closed, you know, like Fort Robinson State Park, you know, it's been at least, I think, 7 or 8 now. So we just extended that closure of, or restriction, I should say, on antlerless mule deer in the Pine Ridge unit. I think it's been 3-4 years now for a unit-wide restriction. And what will it take to get it back there? Well, that's what we're hoping to see, some increases in population levels of mule deer, you know, and if we get that, then we'd be able to put the mule deer does on as eligible for harvest. But we're not there yet, you know, and actually, as you saw Hunter put up on the slide, you know, we actually lowered the permits in the Pine Ridge unit last year. So we've got probably a little ways to go before we can do that on a unit-wide basis anyway, to get antlerless harvest going again with mule deer. So.
Kind of to follow up with that question, in our area down in the Platte, in Keith County and northern Perkins County, we have a overabundance of mule deer doe in that area, and the people around there are wondering when there's going to be some action taken.
Okay, the comment is about the number of mule deer does in the Keith County, the Platte unit. I would suspect that we'll continue increasing that Platte North permit. That's been a pretty successful tool for us to address.
Mule deer.
Yep. That Platte North is an anti-antlerless. It's available for mule deer does. Yeah, it is.
South of the Platte I-80.
Oh, south. You're talking south there.
Yes.
Okay.
Southern Keith County and Perkins County.
Okay, and see, we've had very few complaints of deer in that area, and that's why that part of the unit has not been included in it. So we'll definitely take that into note. And any depredation, stuff like that, always be in touch with our district manager so they know what's going on. They can help you out with the number of tools that we have. So.
What kind of action will they take? Because last year we had them out
I guess I'm not familiar with exactly what's.
I mean, we had a lot of, it's the neighbors, the elderly people who are hitting him with their vehicles. They're getting discouraged. There's
Okay.
an abundance of mule deer.
Yeah.
Go out there.
Okay, and I was gonna say that's kind of one of the first depredation complaints we've had in that country. There's generally not been a whole lot
We had one last
south of. Okay.
Get that in the notes, Justin.
Yep.
Has there been any consideration of going to a preference point system for elk
For the general?
The question is regarding if we've thought of going to a preference point system for elk. Currently, for the general bull tags, it's in a bonus point system, which means your name is in the hat for as many bonus points as you have. A true preference point would mean that you draw from the top pool and work your way down. Our draw odds in those units for the bull tags are so slim that it could progress to upwards of 50 preference points to draw. And if you didn't get in the first year, you could quite possibly never draw. And so that's why we go with a bonus point, so everybody has a chance, but the people who've been in the longest have the best chance to draw. And so that's why we use a bonus point system instead of a preference point.
And I guess the other question would be, to me, I mean, I've put in for a lot of states, and why is it once in a lifetime? And I understand probably to the point where it's 50 years.
Yeah, it's such a limited and raw permit that we decided to do a once in a lifetime for that.
I see this as the state of Nebraska is missing out on a lot of money from application standpoints. You know, as far as charge $40 to fly or $50, similar to Wyoming or Colorado or whatever, and get that revenue. The people that will do it are going to pay it. I mean,
Yeah.
For the most part, you're going to pay, if you're going to hunt elk in Nebraska, you're probably going to pay to hunt them anyways. It's been my experience.
And it's once in a lifetime if you're successful with a bull. You know, cows you can continue to apply for, and if you're unsuccessful with your bull tag, you can get back in after a 5-year waiting period. So it's just limited to if you're successful with the bull at this point.
You could buy and not hunt.
That was one of the considerations we were going to possibly talk about at the recommendation meeting.
A few years ago, and I thought they was gonna go with that, but they still haven't.
Have you guys discussed?
It's always up for discussion. It's a progression of trying to figure out exactly how we want to do that. So we're still waiting on that option to purchase a preference point.
Because some guys, they just can't hunt, but they still don't want to lose that opportunity.
Yeah, and that would be particularly applicable, like in our antelope draw, is where that would mainly apply. But
If I can go back, I'm Doug Zingula, I'm Commissioner for District 7 here. I actually live in Sydney most of the time, but half the time I just spend in the Crawford area, place up there, so last time. I gotta go back and answer a little bit maybe more with this gentleman's question as far as the application fees. There has been some discussion about that. You know, we look at it, I guess, within some of those discussions, I guess we would try to be as sensitive as possible to, you know, the general population here within the state. Not everybody can't afford the $35. We want to make it as accessible to everybody in the state to, you know, to have an opportunity to hunt elk here. But, you know, again, we look at it, but we're going to go back and forth. Part of that, we go back to the legislature, you know, with license fees and, you know, everything that we have to do with that, if we change any of that. But I guess at the end of the day, we've just been sensitive about trying to make this affordable and accessible to everybody here in the state. Which I appreciate, honestly, but no, that people will pay. No doubt. I mean, you know, I don't think you're not knocking one off. And it may we may get to that at some point down the road. I guess I'm just trying to say where we're currently at, but certainly open. I mean, if everybody raises their hand and says yes, they're willing to drop another $35, we'll probably run with that. But, usually it's more of the conversations about, why isn't a deer permit $50 or $30 or general hunting license, $50 and those types of things. So again, we're just pretty sensitive to it, but certainly something we're looking at.
And I think to me that's on the permit side is where I hear most of the complaints about 12 and kind of high for the preference point side or the bonus point or whatever you want to call it. And they're dirt cheap. I mean, that's the way I see it too. I mean, it's no different from the animals. One of my pet peeves is I put in for an animal permit and I have to pay an application fee, be it $5.50, which isn't a big deal. But then you can't, I always buy an archery permit if I don't, and I can't put an archery permit as a second option. I have to pay the application fee. Again, I already have applied for it. I mean, to me, that's kind of. I guess that's my point.
Good point.
Yeah, very good point. We had some discussion about that with other people within the agency too. So.
And it's not necessarily the $42.50.
Yeah.
But don't call it an application fee.
Yeah.
If you already have applied once.
Mm-hmm. I agree. We'll take note of that.
Any discussion on mule deer preference points?
For the.
In the future? Repeat the question.
So.
Asking if there's any discussion about preference points for mule deer.
Yeah, is it going to go to any sort of cross?
Currently, we don't need to because the demand stretches out the permit purchase. I assume you're talking particularly like for Pine Ridge or.
Numbers wise, in any unit.
The only ones that are a draw currently are Frenchman Platte and Republican Mule, and right now. The rest of the units across the rest of the state really they don't sell out quick enough to demand a drawing system to be put in place.
This is regarding that Feed the Hungry program. They say they're running out of money, and when I turned in a animal, they said they have 40 slots left. Is there a way, or how is that funded? Can the hunter pay that fee and still have his animal accepted?
Asking if our Hunters Helping the Hungry, if the hunters can help pay that when funds get low.
Just pay like at the locker. Is that what you're referring to?
You did that, didn't you, Doug?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can maybe address that a little bit
Yeah.
too. So, again, that's a donation currently on the website. You can go in there at the time of buying the license or at any time. You can go in there and make those donations. But the way it is currently set up under the rules, it would be a reimbursement back from the state with the processor. So, it just kind of depends on the year and what comes through. I would be honest with you and tell you there was a shortfall here a month ago, and that came out of the general funds, as opposed to the pocket of the donation money. So it's something that the state continues to, it's a great program. We're getting more and more success with it, more and more people that are utilizing it. But at the same time, we also need to figure out ways to continue to fund the program.
What I was getting at, Doug, is why can't the hunter at the time of him going to the processor
To put an option
why
in
can't
there.
he just say, hey, I'll give you $90 or isn't that what they get paid?
And something like $75.
I mean, that's a pretty cheap price to pay if you don't get your animal processed, because most of that processing is being
Right. Yep, that's definitely something we ought to take a look at, because we are looking at ways to figure out how we're going to continue to fund it with the increase. The program is going faster than what the donations are coming in at.
Good point.
Have you looked at Iowa's?
Have not.
Okay. Take a look at it and see what you think. If I understand it correctly, maybe 10 years ago, they may have come out with that. And what they did is that I think they went to all the potential processing places and said, hey, will you give us a discount? because you're not running down deadbeats on checks and people that don't pick their meat up and so forth. How about if you reduce your fee? I think that the fees then just for a year, just straight processing was probably $65, $70. I think they got them to do it for around $55. Then they turned around and they did. They assessed every hunter for a license. They tacked on $1. And you know, I don't know how you people feel about that, but it was a little, sure, it's just like when taxes go up, but I didn't mind that. I thought it was a great program. It was almost like, hey, I'm giving $1 to feed the hungry. And it was a great program, at least I thought, looking from the outside in. I think that's how they accomplished that. Now, maybe they had a lot of grants. I don't know. Again, just if you could talk to them and see how this all came down and what they did, and maybe they can pick up some pointers that you don't want to do. You see what I mean?
Sure. And we've had, you know, so far as what we reimbursed these processes for, and we did for the most part less than what they would get. So I'll make up the number. We give them 75. Typically they're $100 to skin and butcher a deer. So they're running 25% less than what they would normally get, you know, coming in off the street anyway. But certainly, you know, coming back and looking at license fees, I mean, I know these guys can talk, we just raised license fees here a year ago, and you know, again, everybody is sensitive to that, but certainly, you know, $1, it's kind of like a lot of states have search and rescue, right? You know, and it's stated right on there that X amount goes for search and rescue. So that may be something we would look at here in the future, because it is a good program.
Again, there is the option there, and you apply your permit online.
Right.
Oh, that's nice.
Yep.
One other item I think Hunter mentioned briefly is a deer exchange as well. That doesn't go through the lockers. There's no cost for money exchanging hands. Just a list on our website of people that are willing to take field dressed meat, owned out meat, wide variety of options, particularly here in the Panhandle where we've only had 1 or 2 processors part of the country. That's been really successful. We've had, I usually work Shattern check station. I think this year alone we probably had close to 2 dozen deer change hands just through that. Even people said, hey, got somebody wants one more, we'll go shoot a doe. And they can be back in a couple hours with another doe. So that's real successful.
Is this just questions on anything for you folks or not? I just had a question for you on your telecheck system. A great system, but my suggestion is and maybe you can tell me, maybe I haven't found it in your 2-page deer regulations. But I'm wondering, for those people that shoot deer outside your rifle season, okay, now you're using your telecheck system. So the question I have is, you state nicely on the licenses that you call in 48 hours ahead and check it. At what form do you want the hunters to also be aware of what they're supposed to do with the deer besides fill out the license? You have great regs, you know, they're very clear, but one area that I've noticed is I've always wondered what form do you want that deer in before you call in and get your seal number from your telephone system? Or do you care that they process the meat?
Yeah.
You do?
Well,
Yeah, previous to being checked in, it can't, it still has to either be maintained in the 4 quarters
Okay.
or a
You
full
need to
carcass
tell the
or
hunter
boned.
that.
It says it in there.
It's in the big game guide.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so
Yeah.
not in the deer regs.
It doesn't,
Yeah.
your printout or your permit, it doesn't list that there, but
Yeah.
when it explains the telecheck process in the big game guide, it lists that.
I just know the 2-pager didn't say anything. It gave very specific information regarding your rifle check stations. So, but it did say about the telecheck system, so I kind of went.
The way it's worded in the big game guide is how the deer has to be before the check-in process is That doesn't matter if it's at an actual check station or your call or getting on the internet, that covers all of that.
So what is the form for?
For deer and pronghorn, it would be 4 quarters with, I don't remember how it's.
Femur and
with
scapula
femur and
attached.
Scapula naturally attached.
Okay, so-
And the back straps.
Okay, so
With
With the
elk,
head.
I believe we have it where you can bone out the meat before the check-in process is complete, but that's the only species that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Burrell.
Yeah, I just looked at the 2-pager,
Yeah.
and sometimes I
Absolutely.
wonder if it would have helped, if you would put that
And we can
right on the
look.
license,
Yeah.
perhaps. I know you have a statement that says, you must call this number in 48 hours, and you might put, and before deer is, deer is processed or something.
Yeah. So you have
Or-
to check your deer within
or
the 48 hours.
Form, yeah,
Yep.
the form of deer should be the same as the rifle check-in
The problem is there's only so
before you
much-
call in,
There's
yeah,
only so much space on both of those.
that's right.
But it's a good problem.
Yep. And we'll take a look at that so we can clear it up
And
a
when
little
you,
bit.
and does it say also when you shut down your system, your telesystem, of what to do?
When we shut it down?
Yeah.
Or when it
you
accident?
shut it, you know, if you shoot something a day or two before, does the hunter know you're shutting the system down, the telesystem, and then what to do?
Well,
So we're not gonna.
news releases, but
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
mostly been through a news release system, and we try to alert everybody to let them know that the telecheck system will be shut down. You know, they can still check it in, but they just have to come to a check station, you know, and check it in through that system. Just can't do it over the phone or over the internet.
I believe it's only the 9-day firearm season that shuts down,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
So,
And-
yeah, during the 9-day firearm season for deer
And we
season,
have-
is
And
when
Pronghorn.
that shuts down, but all the rest of the time it's open.
It was
so-
shut down
Yeah.
this year.
So you should be just going off that.
That one we need to discuss, 'cause, yeah.
I guess the general comment that I don't have any feelings one way or the other, but, hunting rifle season during the rut, is there reasons that, Nebraska does it? I just, you know, but.
Okay, the question is why do we hunt deer during the rut here in Nebraska? That's a common question that we get. It's for one, it's something we've historically done. That's why it's just maintain that form. The big reason we do it, it's a really fun time here to hunt deer.
I'm
And
not complaining.
yeah, and so that's the big thing. In that, you know, we've surveyed our hunters here in the past, and we've got another survey coming up this year, and a majority of our hunters don't want to see that change, and so that's why, you know, that there's definitely a larger groundswell of asking for a change in that. So it'll be something we may address here, you know, in the future. We'll continue looking at it in the future. It could be a change in the future that we'll go to. I don't know that it'll be immediate, but it's yeah. We'll keep working with our hunters and see what they want to do.
now it's based on tradition that
Yep.
started in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it, I just.
Yeah, no, I understand.
The,
It's
Yeah.
become a tradition and we learn a lot more about it.
Yeah.
They're looking like there's gonna be any sort of outfitter, government entity coming about, or any sort of regulation on outfitters and becoming a certified licensed outfitter in the state of Nebraska?
Asking about certified outfitters. That's something that comes up for discussion. There's not been a whole lot of push to do that. That I'm aware of.
Yeah, not at this point. I'm not aware of any system being put together to license or regulate outfitters in any way, shape, or form. But it, like Luke said, it does continue to come up, and so maybe that's something that'll be considered in the future. But right now, it's not on the list that I'm aware of. So.
Is there any chance that being these muzzleloaders are just kind of glorified single-shot rifles, they shorten that muzzleloader season down to 2 weeks instead of where it's running right now?
Question.
Yeah, I guess, are we looking at, would we make any changes to our muzzleloader season because of the advancements and evolution of those rifles? or of those weapons. I think that's something that's always up for consideration. We haven't seen a real drastic increase in our muzzleloader harvest. In all of that to necessarily warrant a major change in that.
Our success rate, I believe, is still hovers around archery success
Yeah.
rate, correct? So it's still only in that 20%.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, as efficient as they are, it still hovers right around archery success rates. So
whether because of weather or the other issues that time of the year, it's still a pretty tough hunt.
Has there been any, I guess I can remember when the statewide buck permits came out, it was a draw tag and put in, and now they're obviously over the counter and the price raised dramatically, which neither here nor there, but from myself's perspective, has there been any, even going to a draw on a mule deer, 3-season where you could, I like to hunt muzzleloaders, I also hunt rifle season, but I love to hunt with the bow. The problem is it kind of takes me out of that because I don't want to give up my rifle or my muzzle. Is there, even if it was a draw type preference, type hunt, has there been any considerations of opening up that 3-season tag to mule deer as well?
The question is asking if we've looked at creating a three-season mule deer buck permit, much like we have with our whitetail statewide buck. I don't know that we've had a whole lot of discussion about that.
Not, there hasn't been a whole lot in that regard, but the statewide tags, which are more expensive, do allow more options to use, any weapon, during that particular season. So I don't know if you're aware of that, but
that's just whitetail.
or statewide whitetail, sorry, but yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
The question would be exactly is,
That tag.
could you do that with the mule deer?
Okay, that.
And even make it $180-some or whatever it is, I would pay that to hunt in the boat.
Yeah, and I think the reason we probably haven't gone to that, or the discrepancy between mule deer and whitetail, is the perception that our whitetail herds can handle that abundance of buck harvest, whereas we're a little more sensitive on our mule deer herds. So I think that's probably the main reason we haven't gone to something like that.
And I understand that, but what I'm
Yeah.
also hearing is that there's only a 20% success rate on either side. So.
But there's a 70% success rate with the rifles, and so that's where you're essentially adding more rifle permits to the pool.
Or even in that case, then archery muzzleloader tag.
Yeah.
Take the rifle out.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
I run into that same issue personally, so I know what you're saying.
A primitive weapons permit.
You guys see, going back to giving the bonus, like to kill those, on the season's choice stuff, that used to be a home run hitter for our area. I'm in Mule County. We got thousands of does that need to kill. I only allow people to kill on my place, mule deer does, and anything that, if it's a whitetail, I don't care if it's a milk breath bond or a trophy buck, kill it. But none of my big muley bucks, I never allow, even my own family to kill. I leave them alone. We got some buttes out there. There's a reason for it. But the only way you're going to get them horns is to kill them does. And I would really like to see you guys go back to giving that bonus tag on the season's choice. That was a home run hit for us. We piled up those 15, 20 of them and opened the day legally. And it cheapened that cost of that meat.
Yeah.
Where you're paying the same fee, but you're getting 2 deer. And I can't overstate how much that impacts. I'm a meat hunter guy, and I love having people come out that want meat. But those kind of people cannot afford to go out there and spend a ton on a license, a ton on your habitat stamps and all this other stuff. They want to eat. They want good meat. And I provide that because they open them up and they're full of nothing but corn and alfalfa. None of this grass crap. They're good eating stuff.
Yeah.
That's my corn. And I love watching kids and people come out and kill them things, but if you keep that price down, I'm worried that you're pricing yourself out of a lot of that meat hunter people, by keeping that. I mean, I can afford the license, but still it galls me that I have to pay 25, 30, 35 bucks for a landowner tag when I'm feeding hundreds of them between antelope and deer, and to your credit, years ago, my neighbors and I have problems with the antelope, like I've already indicated. When you come out with those flare things or whatever, I never fired at one time because all that's going to do is drive them right back through your fence you just did.
Yeah.
And tear it all to heck. And what kind of neighbor am I if I'm sending them over to my neighbor and then we both fix things?
Yeah.
So the only way out of this I see is to kill them and to incentivize young kids, adults, I don't care, to come out and just absolutely kill them. That's the only way they're going to get rid of them.
Yeah.
Or you're going to be faced with disease issues, and that's even a bigger travesty.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
That'd be pretty good. That means
You took good notes there?
Yeah, he's quick.
Holy cow.
Shorthand.
I'm writing big.
No, we definitely appreciate the comment, and that's stuff that's always in consideration that we're looking at.
And those bangers and screamers that were brought out to you, I've spent hundreds of hours now shooting them off, scooping pronghorn. They've never ran through a fence once except an electric fence. They've always gone under barbed wire. So they shouldn't go through your fence unless they can't see
What
it.
they do is go through 1 and 2 on the bottom, and all your staples go ping, 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 and then the next thing you know, you're a snap, and then you got them all over. At least on my place, staples just fly, and then you accuse your kid for not fixing the fence, and they, oh, that's right, the antelope just screamed. Well, season's choice for mule deer, that's what I was, antelope's fine, that'd be a great idea, but I was concerned about.
But you're talking bonus tags on the season choice
Yeah.
permits for like the Plains unit. You're in the Morrill County,
Where I'm at,
yeah, the
like
Morrill
Bell,
County,
yeah.
so, yeah.
6, 7.
And that's something that is considered every year, we always go back and look at the survey information, the harvest information, and what did we harvest on those season choice tags or in those late seasons and so forth, and bonus tags are always considered, but we do really see a significant drop off in terms of people that actually use those bonus tags, but certainly if the population warrants it, though, that's always a consideration to add those back. So.
What was your name and location where you're from?
I'm Mike.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions, you guys? We can kind of, do we have some live questions?
Yeah.
Go grab them.
First one, would the commission consider reducing statewide tags to better manage hunter and steer during rifle season?
Remember what? What was that, Matt?
Yep. Would the commission consider reducing statewide tags to better manage hunter and steer during rifle season?
Okay, would we
Basically reducing statewide tags.
would we consider reducing our statewide tags to reduce hunter density during the firearm season? I don't know that we've necessarily looked at that. The statewide tags are a popular tag with our hunters. To reduce that would create its own issues. I had another email from this afternoon that asked some quite similar questions, like if we would break up our hunting seasons the way that Colorado do, the way they have a first, a second, a third, a fourth firearm season. Some of that, in particular on public land, I think if you put a bunch of hunters out there one season, it's gonna be a lot of the same effect. You're gonna impact the animals. The other thing we always consider with a long extended, particularly rifle season where we get a lot of hunters out there, is the impacts on landowners. Our landowners have a certain amount of tolerance for or distolerance, if you say, for a long season, and so we try to keep that impact kind of as short as possible. So there's a whole lot of things that weigh into those issues.
I might add on a little bit to that. There has been some conversation, particularly maybe more in the eastern half of the state where hunter densities are a lot higher than sometimes what we see out here. But there's been some suggestion that maybe we would allow deer season, rifles and deer season to open up early for landowners, pick a number of 5 days a week. But then that also opens up doors to some other problems, particularly for law enforcement in terms of just how do we know who's a landowner and who's not, and some of those types of things. So there's been some of those kinds of discussions, but at this point, no plans to go ahead.
Second question, during the current mountain lion season, will there be daily updates on harvest or only when one or more animals get harvested?
So the question is, during the mountain lion season, will there be daily harvest reports if one's killed? And we'll have to talk to Sam for sure, but I believe he is updating with every lion that is killed. And those hunters can call that phone number that's listed on their permit and receive a daily update. And they have to call every morning anyway, so it should be updated daily, or as we harvest one.
And the last one was called in earlier for landowners, landowner tags, deer tags, which are good for any archery, rifle, muzzleloader season. Is there a reason that they cannot use, or what is the reason they cannot use their weapon of choice during the entire year?
Okay. The question is on our landowner deer permits. Why are they limited to the open season, like bow during bow season, rifle during rifle, muzzleloader during muzzleloader? Part of the reason for that is simplicity, as well as I guess minimizing. Otherwise, you'd end up with a 3-month rifle season, is what it would amount to. You'd run into potential law enforcement questions or issues. You wouldn't know who's out there with a landowner permit, who's not.
Safety.
Yeah, some safety issues, as well. With archers who aren't wearing camo, or aren't wearing blaze orange, I should say.
That's everything I have.
Okay. All right, guys, I think we'll close it down for tonight. We're going to stay around for a while so we can kind of discuss some stuff one-on-one. Another thing I'd like to mention, Dave Fedderson, he's from the Mule Deer Foundation. He's just starting up some chapters in Nebraska, which we haven't had. So if anybody wants to talk with him a little bit, go ahead and do that if you would too.